I woke up to the sound of helicopters earlier. Girls had woken up to the sounds of gunshots. Just 2 blocks away from my campus that morning, terrorists had burst into a synagogue and murdered people we knew with meat cleavers. My school secretary's husband was murdered. My principal's study partner of 20 years was killed. My teacher's son-in-law and young grandchild were there. Her son-in-law was grievously injured. His son had managed to crawl out and run home to tell his mom. One of the terrorists was the guy who worked in the supermarket a few blocks away. He sent us the fish order every week. One girl had staggered into school shaking. She lived off campus and had walked past the synagogue as the attack was taking place. She saw a bloodied man running out, and he shouted at her to run away. Run she did, and as she ran away, she heard gunshots. We were in shock. 2 terrorists had been caught. They thought there was another one who had escaped and was lurking around, waiting to murder some more people. Soldiers and police were locking down our campus, analyzing the weak spots in the perimeter fence. We were scared and panic-stricken. Classes were canceled, and everyone just walked aimlessly around campus, dazed and mourning. My principal was in school when he found out that his study partner was murdered. In Orthodox circles, study partners chavrita share an unbreakable bond and become brothers. He'd learned with him every day for the past 20 years. He walked into our classroom looking 30 years older than he did the day before. His face was ashen white, he was haggard and haunted. His wife told us that every day he would go back to that same synagogue and learn there alone, an empty spot near him. He couldn't bring himself to get another study partner. We didn't know if there would be a repeat attack. My program was on lockdown for that entire day. Other schools were on lockdown for a week. Some parents made their children come home. The tension stretched on for weeks, and we walked down the streets with one eye over our shoulder. In 3rd grade, it's a normal day in school. Then the principal announces that there is an armed individual wearing all black outside of the elementary school. Then we all hear gunshots outside. I know this because everybody looks around in a panic. So anyway, the teacher leads us to a small room with vending machines in it. Then we hide underneath desks. We hear more gunshots, though they were closer now. I gathered enough courage to look out of the window. I see a tall man in black holding a gun. Then my homeroom teacher, and wait a minute, is that blood? A police officer walked into the room where the tall man was and shot him. I looked away for a moment to see if anybody had seen me looking, but nobody saw me. Once I looked back, there was the tall man limping towards us, 2 very dead officers behind him. I hide underneath the desks, scared out of my wits. I hear heavy, dragging footsteps outside, and the door slowly creaks open, and a man walks in. He looks under the desks, and I let out one of my ultimate special screechy, ear-splitting goat screams, and the man was so startled he fell back and hit his head off of one of the vending machines. That man was a police officer. I looked out the window and realized the 2 police officers were really the armed people in black, and the homeroom teacher was really some 6th grader thinking she was going to be a hero. She died in the hospital. This happened back when I was in 5th grade. It was one of the last days of school, and it was also the day we celebrated for finishing elementary school. I was sitting with my friends during lunch when the announcement came on the intercom that the school was going on lockdown. The school speakers are garbage, so I didn't understand what the person had just said. I usually never listen to the intercom anyway, because it always sounded garbled. All the other kids start screaming and began running towards the classrooms, food flying everywhere. It wasn't until my friend shoved me with his shoulder and said, "Hurry up," that I soon put 2 and 2 together and realized we were going in lockdown. We ran into a random classroom and immediately hid under the first desk we saw. My heart was beating hard to the point my chest hurt. The teacher in the classroom turned the lights off and locked the door quickly. Being only 9 or 10 years old, I couldn't hold my tears back and began to cry. This wasn't the first time I cried in front of my friend, and he always made fun of me when I did. But just this once, he looked me in the eye seriously and patted my shoulder. We waited for what felt like hours, and after about 20 minutes passed, someone tried opening the door. Everyone in the room jumped, but the person moved on after about 10 seconds. We waited a few more minutes, and the speaker turned on, and the lockdown was over. It turns out the police had been chasing someone, and that person jumped our school's fence and ran across the field. Considering the person never even entered the building, the person trying to open the door was most likely the principal or school staff. Why do you check if the doors are locked? Honestly, you're just scaring the living daylights out of every kid in that room. This was the only school lockdown I've ever been in, but it was definitely one of the scariest moments of my life.